The day in Cleveland back in 1995 began like any other. Humid heat clung to the skin as Ohio State University graduates celebrated the end of an era. 22-year-old Jessica Miller adjusted the black dress she'd chosen for the occasion. She glanced in the mirror one last time, her brown hair swept into an elegant bun, her green eyes accented by subtle makeup. Tonight was going to be special. Michael had mentioned he had something important to tell her. Michael Thompson and Jessica had been together for 2 years. They'd met in the campus library during their sophomore year when he'd accidentally spilled coffee all over her psychology notes. What began as a disaster blossomed into a relationship Jessica believed would last forever. Michael was a business major, charismatic, popular, and Jessica sometimes wondered what he saw in her. An ordinary criminology student with dreams of working for the FBI. The graduation party was held at the Whitman Mansion, a historic estate on the outskirts of the city. White lights twinkled in the trees, music pulsed from within, and recent graduates drifted in and out, glasses in hand. "Jessica, you finally made it!" Amanda, her best friend, hugged her at the entrance. "Michael's looking for you. Seemed a little on edge. Any idea why?" Jessica smiled, a flutter in her stomach. "He said he had something important to tell me." Amanda raised a suggestive eyebrow. "Do you think—" "I don't know." Jessica blushed. "Maybe." The party was in full swing. Jessica spotted Michael across the hall, locked in an intense conversation with a man she didn't recognize. He was older, maybe in his 30s, wearing a suit that felt too formal for the occasion. Michael was gesticulating, his face tense. When he noticed Jessica watching, his expression instantly softened into a smile. But she had caught something else in his eyes. Fear? "Who was that?" Jessica asked as Michael approached, kissing her on the cheek. "Who? Oh, nobody important. Just a friend of my father's," he replied quickly. "You look beautiful tonight." The compliment momentarily distracted her, but Jessica couldn't help but notice Michael kept glancing toward the door as if expecting someone else. "Is everything okay?" she pressed. "Yeah, of course." Michael drained his drink. "Listen, I have to step out for a moment. I'll be back in 15 minutes, okay? Then we'll talk about that important thing." Without waiting for a reply, Michael slipped away, disappearing into the crowd. Jessica watched him step out into the garden, where the man in the suit was waiting. They exchanged a few words and then both walked toward the parking lot. 15 minutes stretched into 30 and 30 into an hour. Jessica called Michael's cell phone repeatedly, but it went straight to voicemail. She asked their mutual friends, but no one had seen him since he'd left. Finally, she decided to check the parking lot. Michael's car, a blue 1993 Honda Civic, was gone. A knot formed in Jessica's stomach. He had left without her. What could have been so urgent? She returned to the party, trying to enjoy the night, convincing herself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe he'd forgotten something at home. Maybe there was a family emergency. But as the night wore on, worry curdled into anxiety. At 2 a.m., Amanda drove her home. "He'll call tomorrow with some ridiculous excuse, I'm sure of it," she tried to reassure her. But Michael didn't call the next day, or the day after. After 48 hours, Jessica, accompanied by Michael's parents, filed a missing person report at the local precinct. "Any recent fights?" asked Detective Ramirez, a man with a weary face and eyes that had seen too much. "No," Jessica replied, "and everything was fine. He even said he had something important to tell me that night." "Financial trouble? Drugs? Debts?" Michael's parents stepped in. "Our son wasn't involved in anything like that. He was a good student. He had plans." The detective took notes without enthusiasm. Jessica could feel he didn't believe them. That to him, this was just another case of a young man deciding to escape his responsibilities. The reality is, Ms. Miller, Ramirez said, closing his notebook, adults have the right to disappear. There are no signs of foul play. His car is missing. He took his passport. Everything suggests he left voluntarily. But he wouldn't do that, Jessica insisted, tears welling in her eyes. We had plans. We were planning a trip to celebrate graduation. The detective looked at her with what seemed like a mix of pity and condescension. Sometimes we think we know people, Miss Miller, but everyone has secrets. In the weeks that followed, Jessica plastered flyers with Michael's photo all over the city, created a page on the fledgling internet, and contacted every friend and acquaintance. No one knew anything, or so they said. The case was soon shelved. Life went on, but Jessica was stuck. Every face in a crowd could be Michael's. Every phone call could be the one with news. But the silence persisted, relentless like a wound that wouldn't heal. 4 months after the disappearance, Jessica took a job as a security intern at the Eastgate Mall. She needed the money to continue funding her search, and her criminology studies made her an ideal candidate. The job mostly consisted of monitoring security cameras and reporting suspicious activity. It was tedious, but it gave her time to think, to replay the events of that night over and over. It was during one of those monotonous shifts, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, that Jessica saw something that made her heart stop. On monitor 4, which covered the mall's east entrance, a man in a baseball cap and sunglasses walked in hurriedly. Something in his walk, in the slight tilt of his head, sparked a memory. When the man turned briefly toward the camera, Jessica held her breath. Beneath the cap, behind the sunglasses, was the face she had been searching for months. It was Michael. He was alive. He was in Cleveland, and for some reason he didn't want to be recognized. Jessica felt the world stand still. Her fingers trembled over the control panel as she zoomed in, trying to confirm what her eyes already knew. It was him. The way he moved, the profile of his face when he turned his head, even that nervous habit of adjusting his cap. After 4 months of absence, Michael Thompson was less than 100 yards away from her. "Everything all right, Miller?" asked Robert, the security guard supervising her training. He was a retired cop with 20 years on the force and little patience for mistakes. Yes, all good," she replied automatically, her mind racing. She couldn't alert Robert. If she caused a scene, Michael might vanish again. This time, maybe for good. "Going to the restroom," she muttered, standing up abruptly. Robert barely grunted, too focused on his crossword puzzle. Jessica left the monitoring room and headed for the east entrance, her heart hammering against her ribs. Why would Michael fake his own disappearance? Why hadn't he contacted her? Who was he afraid of? The questions piled up as she wove through the Tuesday afternoon shoppers. She reached the east entrance and scanned the crowd, desperate. She saw him heading toward the electronics section, moving with the caution of someone trying not to be seen. Jessica kept her distance, mentally thanking the surveillance classes she'd taken for her criminology degree. Michael entered Radio World, an electronics store. Through the display windows, Jessica watched him approach a back counter, where a thin employee with piercings greeted him with a familiarity that suggested prior meetings. There were no friendly greetings, just a quick exchange of words. The employee disappeared into the back room and returned with a small package, which Michael immediately tucked into the inner pocket of his jacket. Money changed hands, not in a normal customer transaction, but in a discreet, almost imperceptible handoff. A chill ran down Jessica's spine. What was Michael mixed up in? He had never shown any interest in drugs during their relationship, but now, everything she thought she knew about him was in question. Michael left the store and headed for the north exit. Jessica followed, maintaining a safe distance, blending in with the shoppers. Her mind catalogued every detail. Michael had lost weight, his posture was tense, and he constantly glanced over his shoulder. This wasn't the behavior of someone who had simply decided to start a new life. It was the behavior of someone on the run. In the parking lot, Michael walked toward a black sedan Jessica didn't recognize. It wasn't his blue Honda Civic. Before she could get any closer, a second man emerged from the driver's side. He was tall, burly, in a suit that seemed too tight for his frame. Jessica froze, hiding behind an SUV. There was something familiar about him. With a jolt, she recognized him. It was the same man Michael had been talking to at the graduation party just before he disappeared. The two men spoke briefly. Michael handed over the package and received what looked like an envelope. Then, against all of Jessica's expectations, they shook hands like colleagues, and the man in the suit got back in the car. Michael didn't get in. Instead, he started walking toward the nearby bus stop. Jessica made an instant decision. She would go back to the monitoring room. She needed to see the recordings, check if Michael had been to the mall before, establish a pattern. Her gut told her this was just one piece of a much larger puzzle. "Took you long enough," Robert commented when she returned, not looking up from his puzzle. "There was a line," she lied, taking her seat in front of the monitors. Discreetly, she began reviewing the recordings from the previous day, then the day before that. Nothing. She widened the search to the previous week. And there it was. Last Tuesday, same time, same behavior. Michael entering in a cap and sunglasses, the same transaction at Radio World, the same meeting in the parking lot. "What are you looking for so intently?" Robert's voice startled her. "I think I've spotted a pattern. Possible smuggling," she replied, opting for a partial truth. "This guy," she pointed to Michael on the screen, not revealing she knew him, "has come in 2 Tuesdays in a row, makes a suspicious transaction at Radio World, and then hands something off to that man in the parking lot." Robert leaned in, suddenly interested. "Good eye, Miller. Did you see the store employee?" Jessica nodded. "Seems to be in on it. The transaction doesn't go through the register." "Could be electronic smuggling," Robert mused, "or something worse. Let's pull the tapes from the last few weeks." For the next hour, Jessica and Robert systematically reviewed the recordings. They discovered the visits were regular, every Tuesday at 4:30 p.m., for at least the last 3 weeks, though they couldn't confirm exactly how long due to the system's archive limitations. "We should notify the police," Robert finally suggested. Panic seized Jessica. If the police got involved, Michael could disappear again. Besides, something wasn't right. The man in the suit, the regularity of the meetings, the apparent professionalism of it all. What if Michael was in danger? What if he was being coerced? "What if we observe for a couple more weeks?" she proposed. "Gather more evidence, establish a stronger pattern. If we alert them now, they might just change locations, and we'd lose the chance to uncover something bigger." Robert looked at her with a mix of surprise and approval. "You talk like a real investigator, Miller, not some intern." "I studied criminology," she replied, trying to sound casual, "and I've seen enough rushed operations end up with nothing." Robert nodded slowly. "All right, 2 weeks. We document everything, but if we see anything that suggests immediate danger, we call the cops. No exceptions." "No exceptions," Jessica agreed, knowing she had just bought herself valuable time. That night, in her small apartment on the edge of Cleveland, Jessica couldn't sleep. The images of Michael replayed in her mind like an endless film. He was alive. He hadn't contacted her. He was involved in something illegal. Every answer spawned 10 new questions. She got up and pulled out the box where she kept everything related to Michael's disappearance. Photos, newspaper clippings, copies of the police report, notes from her own inquiries. There was something she was missing, some clue she had overlooked. Among the papers, she found a photo taken at the graduation party. Michael was smiling at the camera, his arm around her waist. In the background, barely visible, was the man in the suit, watching them. Jessica had never noticed his presence in the photograph before. With trembling hands, she grabbed a magnifying glass and examined the stranger's image more closely. On his lapel, almost unnoticeable, was a small pin bearing an emblem. Jessica recognized it instantly. It was the crest of the Cleveland Police Department. A cold dread washed over her. The man wasn't a friend of Michael's father, as he had claimed. He was a cop, and if a police officer was involved in what looked like a smuggling operation. The implications were far more serious than she had ever imagined. Jessica slipped the photo into her purse. Tomorrow she would return to the mall, not as a security intern, but as a girlfriend searching for answers. Michael had been missing for 4 months, faking a new life, involved in suspicious activities with a cop, and she was determined to find out why, even if it meant shattering everything she thought she knew about the man she loved. The following days became a calculated dance of surveillance and patience. Jessica adjusted her shifts to cover Tuesdays, meticulously documenting Michael's every move. Robert, impressed by her dedication, gave her access to more security systems, never suspecting her personal connection to the case. A week after her initial discovery, Jessica decided to take the next step. She needed to identify the cop in the suit. With the enlarged photo of the pin in her purse, she headed to the Cleveland Public Library during her lunch break. "I need access to the local press archives," she explained to the librarian, an older woman with thick-rimmed glasses. "I'm doing research for the university on the Cleveland police force." The lie flowed with surprising ease. The librarian guided her to the microfilms of the local newspapers, explaining how to use the equipment. Jessica began to sift through the police news from the last 2 years, searching for ceremonies, commendations, any event where officers were photographed. After 2 hours, just as she was about to give up, she found it. An article from the previous year about a successful drug bust. Among the decorated officers was him, Detective Jason Rawlings, receiving recognition for his undercover work that led to the dismantling of a heroin distribution network. Jessica read the article 3 times. Jason Rawlings, 38, a narcotics detective with 15 years of service, specializing in covert operations. Decorated multiple times for infiltrating criminal organizations. Her mind raced. If Rawlings was a narcotics detective, was Michael working for the police? Was he an informant, or was something more sinister going on? She printed the article and tucked it away with the photograph. As she left the library, a disquieting thought crossed her mind. If she was going to investigate a police officer, she had to be extremely careful. Back at the mall, Jessica resumed her surveillance. It was 5 days until the next Tuesday when she hoped to see Michael again. In the meantime, she decided to investigate the Radio World employee, the accomplice in the transactions. "I need to review the tenant records," she told Robert. "Part of my project is to create security profiles for each store." Robert, by now accustomed to her initiative, gave her access to the files. Jessica found that Radio World had submitted documentation for 6 employees. Comparing them with the recordings, she identified the accomplice. Kevin Mercer, 24, employed for 8 months. When Tuesday arrived, the tension was almost unbearable. Jessica had a plan. This time, she wouldn't just observe. She would try to follow Michael after his meeting with Rawlings to find out where he was living now. At 4:15 p.m., she took her position near the east entrance, dressed in casual clothes and a beanie that partially hid her face. She didn't want Michael to recognize her prematurely. At exactly 4:30 p.m., like a perfectly synchronized clock, Michael walked into the mall. Jessica held her breath. Seeing him up close after so long unleashed an avalanche of emotions she had to suppress. This was no time for sentimentality. She followed him at a discreet distance as he went through the now familiar routine radio world, the exchange with Kevin, the package carefully stowed away. This time, Jessica noticed something else. Michael seemed even more nervous than before, constantly checking his surroundings as if he feared being followed. In the parking lot, the exchange with Rawlings was briefer than on previous occasions. Barely a few words, the handover of the package, the envelope changing hands. But this time, instead of heading to the bus stop, Michael got into the car with Rawlings. Jessica cursed under her breath. She hadn't anticipated this. She hurried back to the mall and into the monitor room. "I need to review the north parking lot recordings right now," she told Robert, who raised an eyebrow at her urgent tone. "Something happened?" "Possibly. The suspect changed his routine." Robert complied, and together they reviewed the footage. The black sedan was pulling out of the lot, but the image quality wasn't clear enough to make out the license plate. "We can enhance this," Robert murmured, typing commands into the system. The image sharpened slightly. "BXN473, he read. "You want me to run it?" Jessica nodded, holding her anxiety in check. As an ex-cop, Robert still had access to certain databases. After a few minutes, his brow furrowed. "That's strange. According to the registry, this plate belongs to a 1990 Toyota Camry, not a luxury sedan. Cloned plate, probably." Jessica's heart hammered. This confirmed her suspicion that something illegal was happening. But what was Michael's role in all of this? She began cautiously. "Do you know a detective named Jason Rawlings?" The reaction was immediate. Robert tensed visibly. His eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Where did you hear that name?" "I think he's the man in the suit. I identified him from a newspaper photo." Robert was silent for a moment, evaluating her. "Rawlings has a reputation," he said slowly, "and not all of it's good. There are rumors he crosses lines when it suits him. Nothing ever proven, of course." "What kind of lines?" "The kind that end with evidence disappearing and witnesses suddenly changing their stories." Robert looked at her intently. "Miller, if Rawlings is involved in whatever you're looking into, I suggest you walk away. He's not someone you want to mess with." Robert's words echoed in her mind all the way home. Jessica knew she should listen to him, that the sensible thing was to back off. But Michael was alive, possibly in danger and involved with a corrupt cop. She couldn't just turn her back on him. In her apartment, she reviewed her notes again. Something was missing, some connection she wasn't seeing. She went back to graduation night, mentally replaying every detail. Michael's nervousness, the conversation with Rawlings, his sudden departure. And then she remembered something. Shortly before the party, Michael had mentioned he was doing a research paper for a class on financial systems. He had spent hours in the university library looking into cases of corporate fraud. Jessica hadn't paid much attention at the time, but now she searched through the boxes of Michael's belongings his parents had asked her to store after he disappeared. Among books and notebooks, she found a folder labeled Final Project, Systems. Inside were handwritten notes, newspaper clippings about a company called Next Gen Pharmaceuticals, and most interestingly, copies of what appeared to be irregular financial records. Jessica spent the night studying the material. NextGen was a Cleveland-based pharmaceutical company that had grown exponentially in recent years. Michael's notes suggested he had discovered discrepancies in their financial reports, possible signs of money laundering. Most disturbingly, among the notes was a list of company executives, and next to one of them, Michael had written, "Connection with CPD, Cleveland Police Department." The pieces were starting to fit. Had Michael uncovered a link between NextGen and the police? Was that what led to his disappearance? The next morning, Jessica called the university and requested a leave of absence for a family emergency. She needed time to investigate without the distractions of work and school. Her first stop was the county records office. As a criminology student, she knew that corporate records were public and she could access them without raising suspicion. Academic research, she explained to the clerk, showing her university ID. After hours of sifting through documents, she found something significant. NextGen had been founded 6 years ago by an Edward Chambers, an entrepreneur with a background in the pharmaceutical industry. Among the initial investors was a firm called Blue Shield Investments, LLC. Digging deeper into that company's records, she discovered one of its directors was none other than Jason Rawlings's wife. "Oh my God," Jessica murmured, her hands trembling as she photographed the documents with her disposable camera. The connection was clear. Rawlings had a financial stake in NextGen through his wife, and Michael had been investigating irregularities in the very same company. But what role did Radio World play in all this? And what was in those packages Michael delivered every week? Jessica decided to take a calculated risk. The next day, she visited Radio World as a regular customer, making sure Kevin Mercer was working. "I'm looking for a portable CD player," she said, carefully watching his reaction. There was no recognition. He had never seen her in the security monitors. "We have several models over here," Kevin replied, guiding her toward a section of the store. While pretending to examine the products, Jessica tested the waters. "A friend of mine recommended this store, Michael Thompson. Do you know him?" The reaction was instant and telling. Kevin tensed, his eyes widening slightly before he regained his composure. "No, the name doesn't ring a bell." "That's strange. He swore he knew you. Tall brown hair, usually comes in on Tuesdays." "Miss, we serve hundreds of customers. I can't remember them all," Kevin interrupted, his tone now defensive. "If you'll excuse me, I have other customers to help." Jessica knew she had struck a nerve. He knew Michael, or at least knew him well enough to be alarmed by the mention of his name. She left the store certain she was on the right path, but also with the unsettling feeling that she had just alerted someone to her investigation. If Kevin told Rawlings about her visit, things could get complicated fast. That night, as she was organizing her findings, Jessica heard a noise at her apartment door, the sound of someone trying to pick the lock. Her heart hammering in her chest, she killed the lights and grabbed her phone, ready to dial 911. The door creaked open. A silhouette was framed against the light from the hallway. "Jessica?" The voice was barely a whisper, but she recognized it instantly. "Michael, don't turn on the light," Michael warned, closing the door softly behind him. In the gloom, Jessica could barely make out his shape, but the voice was unmistakably his. They might be watching the building. Jessica stood frozen, emotions warring inside her. Relief, anger, confusion, all mixed in a whirlwind that threatened to drown her. 4 months of anguish, of unanswered questions, and now he just appeared in her apartment like a ghost made solid. "Who?" she finally asked, her voice steadier than she expected. "Rawlings and his men." In the darkness, she could feel Michael's surprise. "How do you know about Rawlings?" "I've been watching you, Michael. On the mall cameras, your weekly meetings at Radio World, the exchanges in the parking lot. I know he's involved with NextGen Pharmaceuticals through his wife. What I don't know is why you faked your death and what the hell you're doing." Michael moved cautiously, sitting on the edge of the sofa, keeping a distance between them. "I didn't fake my death, Jess. I went into hiding. I had to, and I never wanted to involve you in this." "I've been involved since the moment you vanished without an explanation," she retorted, bitterness seeping into every word. "Do you have any idea what I've been through these past few months? Your parents are devastated. We all thought you were dead." I'm sorry, he murmured. I had no choice. What I found is bigger and more dangerous than you can imagine. Jessica switched on a small table lamp, adjusting it to give off the bare minimum of light. She needed to see his face to read his expression. Michael had lost weight. He had dark circles under his eyes and a fresh scar on his left cheek. He looked like he had aged years in a matter of months. "Explain it to me," she demanded. "From the beginning." Michael let out a long breath. "It all started with that research project on corporate fraud. I chose NextGen as a case study because I'd read about its meteoric growth. At first, I was just looking for accounting inconsistencies for my final paper. But I found so much more. The irregular financial records," Jessica nodded. "I saw them in your folder. NextGen isn't just a pharmaceutical company, Jess. It's a front for a Sinaloa cartel money laundering operation. They use the import of chemical compounds to bring drugs into the country, and the profits from distribution are washed through their books." Jessica processed the information. "And Rawlings is supposed to be investigating them, but he's on their payroll instead. He protects the operation, diverts investigations, provides intel on police raids. In return, he gets paid through his wife's investment in the company. It's brilliant, really. Technically legal on the surface. So how did you go from researching this to disappearing and becoming whatever you are now?" Michael rubbed his face with his hands, a gesture of pure exhaustion. "The night of the graduation party, Rawlings cornered me. He said he knew what I'd been looking into, that he had eyes at the university. He gave me two options: disappear forever or end up as another student who died of an accidental overdose. Why didn't you go to the authorities?" "Who? Rawlings is the head of the narcotics unit. His colleagues respect him. He has connections in the DA's office. I tried to gather more proof before I came forward, but he found me out. I had to run that night." "But you came back to Cleveland," Jessica pointed out. "And now you're working for him. I saw you delivering packages." Michael gave a humorless smile. "I'm not working for him. I'm working against him. After I got away, I contacted the FBI. They already had suspicions about NextGen and corruption in the CPD. But they needed solid evidence. I offered to go undercover as an informant." The revelation hit Jessica like a cold wave. "You're an FBI informant?" "Officially, I'm Michael Torres, a mid-level dealer working for the cartel. The packages I drop at Radio World contain listening devices and GPS trackers that Kevin, who's also working for the FBI, camouflages inside electronics. Then I deliver these modified products to Rawlings, who distributes them to NextGen executives, never knowing they're being monitored." "That's why you switched the packages at Radio World," Jessica murmured, the pieces clicking into place. "And the envelopes I get back? They contain information on upcoming meetings, transactions, shipments. Everything I gather goes straight to the FBI. We're building the case slowly, documenting every connection, every transaction." Jessica struggled to absorb it all. "Then why risk coming here now? Why expose yourself?" Michael's expression darkened. "Kevin told me you were in the store asking about me. If Rawlings finds out you're looking for me, you become a target. I came to warn you, to ask you to stop digging. You're asking me to pretend I haven't seen you, to go on as if you're still missing. I'm asking you to stay alive," he replied with intensity. "This operation is in its final phase. In a few weeks, the Bureau will have enough to arrest Rawlings, the NextGen execs, and bring down the whole network. After that, I can go back to my life. If there's any of it left to go back to." The last sentence hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning, with questions about a future that felt more uncertain than ever. "What happens to you after?" she asked, her voice soft. "Witness protection?" Michael nodded. "Probably. It depends on how many cartel members they can round up, and how safe they think I am." A tense silence filled the room. Jessica was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. On one hand, there was the profound relief of knowing Michael was alive, that he hadn't abandoned her. On the other, a simmering anger for the months of anguish, and now, a cold fear for what they both faced. "I should hate you," she said finally. "I know, but I can't," she continued, her voice cracking slightly. "And now I'm in danger because I couldn't just let you go." Michael stepped closer, cautiously taking her hands in his. The contact, after so long, sent a shiver down her spine. "I'm sorry, Jess. I never wanted this for you. If I could go back—" "You can't," she cut him off. "Neither can I. We're here now. You have to promise me you'll be careful," he said, his grip tightening. "No questions about me. No digging into Next Gen or Rawlings. Keep your normal routine. Act like you're still looking for me and finding nothing. What if I want to help? I have access to the security cameras. I could—" "No," Michael cut in, his tone firm. "The FBI has resources, training, protection. You have a life ahead of you, a career. I won't risk your safety." "It's my decision," she insisted. "Please." His voice softened. "I've already lost too much. I couldn't bear to lose you too. Permanently." The sound of a car pulling up outside shattered the moment. Michael tensed, moving swiftly to the window and peering through the blinds. "Black sedan," he murmured, the panic in his voice unmistakable. "It could be Rawlings' men. They shouldn't know I'm here, but they've been watching you." "The building has a rear exit through the basement," Jessica said, adrenaline sharpening her thoughts. "We can use it." Michael shook his head. "No. You stay. If you disappear with me, they'll know we've been in contact. I have to go alone. But listen to me." He gripped her shoulders, his eyes locking onto hers. "If they come for you, act surprised. Tell them you're still looking for me, that you don't know anything. Your shock at the mall was real. Use it." Jessica wanted to protest, but she knew he was right. "When will I see you again?" "When it's over," he promised. "If everything goes to plan, the FBI will make their raids in 3 weeks. After that—" He left the sentence unfinished, the future too uncertain for promises. He leaned in and kissed her, a brief, desperate press of lips that was both a farewell and a vow. "Stay safe," he whispered. And before she could reply, he was gone, slipping out the door and moving silently toward the fire escape. Jessica stood frozen, listening. Footsteps in the hall, male voices, a knock on her neighbor's door. She held her breath, waiting for the next knock to fall on her own. But it never came. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps receded. Whoever it was, they hadn't come for her. At least not tonight. The following days passed in a state of constant vigilance. Jessica stuck to her routine, attending classes and working at the mall. But every shadow, every car parked for too long, every lingering glance from a stranger sparked her paranoia. The weight of the secret she now shared with Michael felt like a physical burden on her shoulders. In the monitor room, her professional surveillance continued, but now with a different purpose. She was no longer looking for answers about Michael, but for potential threats. Was Rawlings watching her too? Had he noticed her interest in his activities? "You seem on edge," Robert remarked during their Thursday shift. "Trouble with that case you're tracking?" Jessica forced a neutral expression. "Just tired. Final exams." Robert nodded, seemingly satisfied with the explanation, but Jessica noticed he was watching her more closely than usual. Robert had been a cop for decades. He had an instinct for when something was off. The following Tuesday arrived with an unbearable tension. Jessica took her usual post in front of the monitors, waiting for Michael's 4:30 p.m. appearance. But 4:30 came and went. Then 4:45, and there was still no sign of him. "Looking for someone in particular?" Robert's voice made her jump. Just checking if our suspects are keeping to their routine, she replied, trying to sound professional. At 5:15, just as Jessica had begun to fear the worst, Michael finally appeared at the east entrance. Something was different. His body language, normally tense but controlled, showed signs of clear agitation. He was moving faster. He was constantly looking over his shoulder. She watched him head to Radio World, but instead of the usual discreet transaction with Kevin, there was what appeared to be a heated conversation. Michael was gesticulating. Kevin was shaking his head. Finally, Michael pulled something from his pocket, a small device Jessica couldn't identify, and slid it across the counter. "That doesn't look like part of the usual routine," Robert commented, now also interested in the scene. "No, it definitely isn't," Jessica agreed, her concern growing. Michael hurried out of Radio World and, instead of heading to the parking lot for his meet with Rawlings, he took the path toward the mall's restrooms. Jessica quickly adjusted the camera to follow him, but lost him for a moment in the flow of shoppers. "I'm going to do a walkthrough," she announced, standing up. "I want to see if I can intercept him." "Miller," Robert's voice stopped her at the door. "Be careful. We don't know what this guy is into." Jessica nodded and hurried out, her heart pounding. What had changed? Why had Michael altered his routine so drastically? She nearly collided with him as she rounded a corner. Michael grabbed her arm and pulled her into a little used service corridor. "What are you doing?" Jessica hissed. "They're watching you. The cameras—" "It doesn't matter anymore," Michael interrupted, his voice strained. "The operation's been moved up. The FBI is raiding them tonight." "What?" "You said 3 weeks. Something went wrong. I think Rawlings suspects. He's been asking questions, digging deeper into my background." Michael pulled a small envelope from his jacket and pressed it into her hand. "Keep this. It's a backup of all the evidence I've gathered. Names, dates, bank transfers, everything. If something happens to me—" "Don't say that," she interrupted, a chill running through her. "It's just a precaution. My FBI contact, Agent Carter, will come find you if he can't reach me. Give this only to him, no one else." Jessica clutched the envelope in her bag, her hands trembling slightly. "What are you going to do now?" "I have to meet Rawlings. One last drop, then I disappear until it's over." He glanced at his watch. "I have to go. I'm supposed to meet him in 10 minutes. "Michael." Jessica stopped him as he turned to leave. "Be careful." He offered a tense smile. "Always." Then, surprising her, he kissed her briefly. "Whatever happens, remember that everything I did was to protect you." Before she could respond, Michael was gone, melting back into the mall crowd. Jessica returned to the monitor room, trying to control her anxiety. Robert gave her a curious look but asked no questions. In silence, they adjusted the cameras to follow Michael as he headed to the parking lot. Rawlings' black sedan was already there, parked in a secluded corner. Michael approached, visibly tense. The camera captured the conversation, though without audio. What began as a seemingly normal exchange soon escalated into something more intense. Rawlings was gesticulating aggressively, his face red with anger. Michael backed away, his hands held up in a defensive gesture. "This doesn't look good," Robert muttered. Just then, Rawlings reached into his jacket. The metallic glint was unmistakable even on the grainy security feed. "He's got a gun!" Jessica exclaimed, jumping to her feet. "Call 911, Robert ordered, also getting to his feet. "I'm going out there." "No!" Jessica stopped him. "He's a cop. If you interfere—" But it was too late. Robert was already running for the door, his ex-officer's instinct overriding any other consideration. Jessica picked up the phone with trembling hands, dialing 911 and reporting a firearm incident in the north parking lot of the Eastgate Mall. Then, against all better judgment, she ran after Robert. When she reached the parking lot, the scene was chaotic. Robert was standing near the sedan, his own gun, Jessica didn't know he carried one, aimed at Rawlings, who in turn had his weapon pointed at Michael, a deadly triangle frozen in time. "Police, drop the weapon," Rawlings was shouting. "I know who you are, Rawlings," Robert replied with a forced calm. "And I know this isn't official. Put the gun down now." Jessica stayed back, seeking cover behind a concrete pillar. Michael saw her and his expression twisted in horror. "Jessica, get out of here!" he yelled. His shout distracted Rawlings, who turned briefly in her direction. It was all the opening Michael needed. In one fluid motion, he lunged at Rawlings, trying to disarm him. What followed seemed to unfold in slow motion. The two men wrestled for control of the weapon. Robert lunged forward, trying to separate them. A single shot cracked through the parking garage, its report amplified by the echo between the cars and concrete walls. For a second that stretched into an eternity, all three men stood frozen. Then Robert staggered back, a dark stain blossoming across his shirt. "No!" Jessica's scream tore through the air. Rawlings seized the moment of confusion, shoving Michael away. He broke free and sprinted toward his car. Michael hesitated, torn between pursuing Rawlings and helping Robert. Jessica was already at Robert's side, where he had collapsed against a sedan. "Help!" she screamed at Michael. "He's hurt!" Michael dropped to his knees beside Robert, pressing his hands against the wound. "Keep pressure here," he instructed Jessica, his voice taut. "I have to go after him. He has the evidence." "You can't leave us," Jessica protested, her hands now slick with blood. "The ambulance is on its way," Michael said, already running toward his own vehicle parked a short distance away. "Keep him alive!" The faint wail of sirens began to cut through the air. Jessica pressed down desperately on Robert's wound. "Hold on, Robert. Help is coming." Robert looked up at her, his breathing growing more labored. "Miller, be careful. With Rawlings. Don't talk. Save your strength. He's not just a corrupt cop," Robert continued, each word a visible effort. "He's dangerous, has connections." The sirens grew louder. Jessica saw the flashing lights of an ambulance turning into the garage. "Here!" she yelled, waving a blood-soaked arm. "Gunshot wound, over here!" Paramedics rushed toward them, taking control of the situation. As they loaded Robert onto a stretcher, a second vehicle screeched into the garage, a police cruiser. Two officers approached quickly. "What happened here?" one of them asked, his eyes fixed on the blood covering Jessica's hands and clothes. "Detective Jason Rawlings," Jessica said, deciding in that instant that a partial truth was her best option. "He was arguing with a man. He pulled a gun. Robert Martinez, a security guard, tried to intervene and was shot." "Rawlings? From narcotics?" The officer sounded incredulous. "Yes. He left in a black sedan that way," Jessica pointed. "The other man went after him." "Can you identify the other man?" Jessica hesitated for only a second. "No, I've never seen him before." The officer gave her a suspicious look but didn't press the point. "We'll need your full statement. You'll have to come down to the station." Jessica nodded, watching the ambulance pull away with Robert. "Can I go to the hospital first? Robert is my supervisor. I want to make sure he's okay." "I'm sorry, ma'am. Standard procedure, station first." As they escorted her to the patrol car, Jessica's mind raced. She thought of Michael chasing Rawlings, of the envelope hidden in her purse, of the FBI raid that was supposed to happen that night. How much should she say? Who could she trust when corruption seemed to run so deep within the police department? One thing was clear: the truth about Michael and everything connected to Next Gen was about to come out. For better or for worse, she was in the center of the coming storm. The Cleveland Central Precinct was buzzing with activity as the officers led Jessica through the main doors. The contrast between the cold outside and the stuffy heat within hit her like a wall, intensifying the claustrophobia she already felt. Her hands, though cleaned after a brief stop at a gas station restroom, still felt stained with Robert's blood. They led her to a small interrogation room. Gray walls, a metal table bolted to the floor, two uncomfortable chairs, and a mirror that was obviously one-way glass. Jessica had studied enough criminology to recognize the tactics: the deliberately uncomfortable room, the prolonged wait to heighten anxiety, all designed to break down resistance. After what felt like an eternity, the door opened. A man in his 50s entered, his wrinkled suit suggesting long, continuous hours of work. He introduced himself as Detective Marshall Reed from Internal Affairs. "Miss Miller," he began, placing a recorder on the table. "We're investigating a serious incident involving a police officer. I need your complete version of the events." Jessica took a deep breath. She had decided during the ride that a partial truth was her best strategy, enough to help the investigation without compromising Michael or revealing her relationship with him. "I work as a security intern at Eastgate Mall," she began. "For the past few weeks, my supervisor, Robert Martinez, and I had noticed a suspicious pattern. A man would regularly visit an employee at Radio World. They'd make what looked like illegal exchanges, and then he would meet another man in the parking garage." "And that other man was Detective Rawlings?" Reed asked. Jessica nodded. "We didn't know he was a cop at first. We just noticed they were using fake plates on their vehicle, which raised our suspicions." Reed took notes. "What happened today?" "The routine changed. The first man seemed agitated. He had an argument with the Radio World employee. Then in the garage, Rawlings pulled a gun. Robert tried to intervene." Her voice cracked slightly. "There was a struggle, the gun went off, and Robert was hit." "Did you personally know either of these men? The one who met with Rawlings, for example?" Jessica kept her expression neutral, mentally thanking her high school acting classes. "No, only through surveillance." Reed studied her for a moment, his eyes searching for any sign of deception. "That's strange, Miss Miller. We have reports that you've been asking specific questions about this man. You even visited Radio World as a customer, asking for him by name." Jessica's heart lurched. Kevin must have reported her visit, probably to Rawlings, who would have alerted other officers. "I was investigating," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "As part of our security monitoring, we needed to identify the suspects." "And you found out his name?" "Michael Thompson," she answered, deciding that denying the obvious would only make her look more suspicious. "But I don't know him personally." Reed consulted his notes. "Curiously, 4 months ago, you filed a missing persons report for a Michael Thompson. Your boyfriend, according to the file." Jessica felt the floor vanish from beneath her feet. She hadn't anticipated they would connect the dots so quickly. "It's a coincidence," she stammered, knowing how weak it sounded. "My boyfriend disappeared after our graduation. I never imagined the man on the monitors could be him. He looked similar, but I thought Michael was—" She didn't finish the sentence, letting the implications hang in the air. Reed switched off the recorder and leaned forward. "Miss Miller, let me be clear. We are investigating a possibly corrupt detective who has shot a civilian. If you are obstructing this investigation or withholding information, you could face serious charges." Jessica held his gaze. "I understand the gravity of the situation, Detective Reed. I'm telling you everything I know, including that the man who chased Rawlings after the shooting is your missing boyfriend." "I can't confirm that," Jessica replied, which was technically not a lie. "It all happened so fast. I was focused on helping Robert." Reed sighed, clearly unconvinced. "Let me explain something to you. Right now, 2 SWAT teams are preparing for simultaneous raids. One at the offices of Next Gen Pharmaceuticals, another at a warehouse on the docks." It's a coordinated operation between the FBI and our anti-corruption unit. Jessica kept her expression neutral, though inside her mind was racing. The operation Michael had mentioned was underway. What worries me, Reed continued, is that if your boyfriend is involved with Rawlings in illegal activities, he could be in grave danger right now. Rawlings knows we're onto him. He won't leave any witnesses. The strategy was clear: scare her into revealing Michael's whereabouts. Jessica held firm. Detective Reed, if I could help you find either of them, I would, but I don't know where they are. The door opened abruptly. An African-American woman in her 40s, dressed in a dark suit with an FBI badge visible on her belt, entered without ceremony. Reed, I need to speak with Miss Miller, now. Reed frowned. We're in the middle of an interrogation, Agent. Carter, FBI, the woman said, flashing her credentials. And this is no longer local jurisdiction. It's part of an ongoing federal investigation. The name made Jessica tense. Carter, Michael's contact at the FBI. Reed looked like he wanted to protest, but finally gathered his notes and left, not without casting a warning glance at Jessica. Once they were alone, Agent Carter took a seat opposite Jessica. Jessica Miller, Michael told me about you. Is he okay? Jessica asked immediately. Do you know where he is? Carter shook her head. We lost contact after the incident at the mall. His last report indicated that Rawlings had found a listening device and suspected a mole. I need you to tell me exactly what happened today. Jessica recounted the events in detail, this time omitting nothing. The conversation with Michael in the service corridor, the envelope he'd given her, the chase. The envelope, Carter said urgently. Do you have it with you? Jessica nodded, pulling the envelope from her purse and handing it over. Carter opened it quickly, examining its contents: a USB drive, several documents, and photographs. This could be crucial, she murmured, putting everything away. Michael has been working with us for months, infiltrating deeper and deeper into the operation. The information he's gathered allowed us to identify the entire network, from the street-level dealers to the executives at NextGen and the corrupt officers. Officers? Plural? A chill ran down Jessica's spine. Rawlings isn't acting alone. He has at least 3 other officers on his payroll, possibly more. Carter looked at her intently. That's why we need to get you out of here. We don't know who to trust inside this department. What about Robert, the guard who was shot? He's in surgery. The bullet pierced a lung, but the doctors are optimistic. Carter stood up. Come on, I'm taking you to a safe location until we complete the raids. As they headed for the door, it swung open again. Reed stood there, accompanied by another detective Jessica didn't recognize. Agent Carter, Reed said, his tone now cold. I'm afraid there's a problem with your credentials. We've contacted the local FBI field office, and they have no record of any ongoing joint operation. Carter remained composed. It's a classified operation, Detective Reed. Of course, it doesn't appear in regular channels. Even so, we'll need additional verification before we hand over our witness. The second detective took a step forward, his hand resting discreetly near his weapon. Jessica watched the rising tension, her mind working furiously. Something didn't add up. Reed had mentioned the raids on NextGen and the warehouse before Carter appeared. How did he know about a supposedly classified FBI operation? The answer struck her like a physical blow. Reed was in on it. He was one of the officers on Rawlings's payroll. Carter seemed to reach the same conclusion at the same instant. In one fluid motion, she drew her weapon. Detective Reed, keep your hands where I can see them. Jessica, get behind me. Come on, Agent. Reed smiled without humor. 3 against 1. It doesn't make sense. 3? Carter asked, not lowering her gun. The sound of a door opening behind them confirmed Reed's words. Jessica turned to see a uniformed officer entering through a side door, his weapon already drawn. "Put your weapons down and no one gets hurt," Reed ordered. "We just want to talk." "Like you talked to Robert Martinez?" Jessica challenged. The situation seemed hopeless. Suddenly, the lights in the precinct flickered and died, plunging them into a dim twilight lit only by emergency strobes. Seconds later, a series of deafening explosions shook the building. "Stun grenades! Get down!" Carter yelled, shoving Jessica to the floor as she fired toward Reed. Chaos erupted. Shouts, more explosions, the sound of heavy boots pounding down the hallways. Through the open doorway, Jessica glimpsed men in tactical vests with FBI emblazoned across them, advancing in formation down the corridor. "FBI, everybody on the ground! Hands where I can see them!" Reed and the second detective tried to return fire but were quickly neutralized by the incoming agents. The uniformed officer dropped his weapon, surrendering instantly. Carter helped Jessica to her feet. "Looks like our backup arrived just in time." An agent approached them. "Agent Carter, the perimeter is secure. We have Reed and we've identified the other officers on the list." "Rawlings?" Carter asked. "Not yet, but we just got a call from the unit at the docks. It seems our informant has located him." "Michael?" Jessica couldn't stop the question. "Is he okay?" The agent looked at Carter, who nodded, giving him permission to answer. "He's alive, but injured. Apparently there was a confrontation with Rawlings at the warehouse. They're both being transported to Cleveland Memorial under guard." Jessica felt her legs buckle. Carter held her steady. "I'll take you there," the agent said. "But first, we need to make sure you're secure. This operation is still live, and Next Gen has considerable resources." As they were escorted out of the precinct, now swarming with federal agents processing handcuffed police officers, Jessica watched the chaos with a mixture of relief and apprehension. The nightmare seemed to be ending, but at a cost she couldn't yet begin to calculate. Would this ever truly be over? She asked the question in a low voice, more to herself than to Carter. The agent looked at her with an expression that mingled compassion and resolve. "We're almost at the end, Jessica. Michael risked everything to expose this network. Now we have to make sure his sacrifice was worth it." As they climbed into a black, armored FBI SUV, Jessica thought of Michael, wounded, but alive. She thought of everything she had lost and gained in these last 4 months of hell. Soon she would have answers. Soon she would know the whole truth. Or so she hoped. The Cleveland Memorial Hospital was under an unprecedented security lockdown. FBI agents guarded every entrance, checked the IDs of medical staff, and maintained a protective perimeter around the entire 5th floor, where they had established a makeshift security unit. Jessica waited in a small consultation room, temporarily converted into a waiting area for those connected to the operation. Agent Carter had disappeared to coordinate aspects of the investigation, promising to return with news about Michael. The hours passed with agonizing slowness. Through the window, Jessica could see the Cleveland night sky, the city lights glittering against the darkness. Occasionally, the sound of a helicopter overhead would break the silence, a stark reminder that the operation was still active in other parts of the city. "Miss Miller," Jessica turned to find a middle-aged doctor standing in the doorway. "Robert Martinez is out of surgery. He's stable. Can I see him?" The doctor shook his head. "He's still in recovery, perhaps in a few hours." "And Michael Thompson?" She couldn't stop herself from asking. "I'm not authorized to give information on other patients. I'm sorry," the doctor replied with a neutral expression before retreating. Jessica returned to her solitary vigil, her mind replaying the events of the last few months, trying to fit all the pieces together. Michael investigating Next Gen for a university project. Discovering a money laundering scheme. Rawlings threatening him. The FBI recruiting him as an informant. It was almost impossible to believe it had all started with a simple academic paper. The door opened again. This time it was Agent Carter. Her expression was unreadable. "Michael's out of danger," she announced, causing Jessica to release a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He took a bullet to the shoulder, but the doctors managed to extract it without complications. "Can I see him?" Carter hesitated. "He's in protective custody, technically only authorized personnel." Seeing the look on Jessica's face, her tone softened. "I'll get you 5 minutes." They followed a heavily guarded corridor until they reached a room with 2 armed agents at the door. Carter showed them her ID and briefly explained the situation. They nodded, allowing them to pass. Michael was lying in the hospital bed, his left shoulder bandaged. A heart monitor beeped with a steady, reassuring rhythm. He was pale with dark circles under his eyes, but they lit up when he saw Jessica. "Hey," he said, his voice weak. "Hey," she replied, moving closer to the bed. She wanted to hug him, hit him, and kiss him all at once. "You got shot." "Yeah." "Rawlings wasn't too happy when I cornered him at the warehouse." He tried to smile, but a grimace of pain ruined the effect. "I told him I was playing for the wrong team all this time, Michael." Jessica took his hand, feeling its warmth, the tangible proof that he was really alive. "Why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning? Why let me believe you had just disappeared?" Michael's smile faded. "Rawlings told me specifically that if I contacted anyone, especially you, he wouldn't hesitate to hurt you. I couldn't risk it." He squeezed her hand. "Besides, the FBI needed my disappearance to look genuine. If you had acted like you knew I was alive, it would have raised suspicion." Carter, who had been standing discreetly near the door, stepped in. "Michael has been fundamental to this operation. Without his work, we never would have discovered the extent of the corruption, or Next Gen's connections to the cartel." "Rawlings?" Jessica asked. "2 floors up, under constant surveillance," Carter replied. "He'll live to stand trial. The same can't be said for some of his accomplices." "What do you mean?" "Edward Chambers, CEO of Next Gen, apparently committed suicide when our agents arrived at his residence, and one of the corrupt officers was killed in a shootout when he tried to escape during the raid on the precinct." Jessica absorbed this information in silence. Lives lost, families destroyed, all for money and power. "What happens now?" she finally asked, addressing both Michael and Carter. "Long trials," Carter answered. "We've seized tons of documents, electronic devices, bank accounts. The case against Next Gen and the corrupt officers is solid." "I mean, for us," Jessica clarified, looking at Michael. "What happens to you?" Michael exchanged a look with Carter before answering. "Witness protection program, probably, at least until the trials are over and the cartel members who are still free are captured." The reality of what that meant hit Jessica like a cold wave. A new identity, a new city, a new life. "It's necessary," Carter intervened. "Michael helped expose an international drug trafficking network with connections in 3 countries. The cartel will not forgive that." "I understand," Jessica said, though every fiber of her being rebelled against the idea of losing Michael again. This time, perhaps forever. 5 minutes, Carter reminded them, heading toward the door. "I'll leave you alone." She slipped out, closing the door quietly behind her. Michael tried to sit up, wincing in pain. "Jessica, what I'm about to say to you is probably the most difficult conversation I've ever had to have." Jessica felt her heart begin to race. "More difficult than faking your own death?" "Much more." Michael took a deep breath. "I love you. These months apart have been hell. I thought about you every single day, wondering if you were okay, if you'd moved on with your life. I didn't, Jessica confessed. I couldn't. Something inside me refused to accept that you had just vanished. And you were right. Michael paused, as if gathering his strength. Carter has offered me two options. I can enter the program alone, restart my life somewhere far away, and never contact you again to keep you safe. Jessica felt tears threatening to spill. And the second option, you can come with me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning and consequence. Come with you? Jessica repeated, processing the proposal. Leave my family, my studies, my whole life? It's a lot to ask, I know. Michael replied, his voice cracking slightly. Too much, probably. You'd have to leave everything, adopt a new identity, never be able to talk about your past life. And all for a man who lied to you, who caused you so much pain. You didn't lie to hurt me, Jessica interrupted. You did it to protect me. Still, I can't ask you to sacrifice everything for me. Jessica fell silent, her mind racing through the implications of both choices. A life without Michael, continuing on in Cleveland, finishing her degree, keeping her friends and family. Or a completely new life in an unknown place with a different name, but with Michael by her side. How long do I have to decide? She finally asked. 48 hours max, Michael answered. Once the trials begin and my name is made public as an FBI informant, the danger will increase exponentially. And if I decide not to go, could we stay in touch somehow? Michael shook his head, silly. Part of the program is cutting all ties to your previous life, no exceptions. It would be as if I really had died. The weight of the decision felt overwhelming. Jessica watched Michael's face, memorizing every detail. The small scar above his right eyebrow from a bike fall when he was a kid. The nearly invisible mole on his jaw. The way his eyes seemed to change color depending on the light. I've missed you so much, she whispered, leaning in to kiss him gently. Every day, every night, it was like a part of me disappeared with you. I know, he replied, caressing her cheek. I felt the same way. There were times I almost abandoned the mission just to see you, to explain everything. Why didn't you? Because every time the temptation was too strong. I remembered Rawlings's threat. I knew what he was capable of. And then there was the case, all those lives affected by the drugs Next Gen was helping to distribute. I couldn't walk away, not when we were so close. A soft knock on the door interrupted the moment. Carter peeked her head in. I'm sorry, but we have to go. The doctors need to check on Michael and we have an emergency briefing in 20 minutes. Jessica stood up reluctantly. I'll come tomorrow, she promised Michael. I'll be here, he replied with a tired smile. Think about what I said, but Jessica, whatever you decide, I'll understand. I just want you to be happy, even if it's without me. Carter escorted Jessica back to the waiting area. On the way, she stopped in front of a coffee machine and bought 2 cups. It's going to be a long night, she explained, offering one to Jessica. I thought you might need this. Thank you. Jessica accepted the drink, grateful for the warmth of the cup between her hands. Can I ask you something, Agent Carter? Of course. If you were in my place, what would you do? Carter looked at her with a mixture of surprise and understanding. That's a very personal decision, Jessica. I can't tell you what to do. I know, I want your perspective. You've seen cases like this before, I assume. Carter sighed, taking a sip of her coffee. I've seen people enter the program alone and with families. The ones who go alone, they often struggle more. The loneliness, the loss of identity, it's hard to bear without someone who understands exactly what you're going through. She paused. But I've also seen relationships that don't survive the pressure. The resentment builds when the reality of what they've lost settles in. That's not a very encouraging answer, Jessica commented with a sad smile. The truth rarely is. Carter looked at her directly. What I can tell you is this. Michael is an exceptional man. He risked his life repeatedly. He faced his fears, all to do the right thing. That kind of integrity is rare. Jessica nodded, thinking of the Michael she had known in college. Always standing up for just causes, always worried about others despite everything that had happened. That fundamental core of his character remained intact. I have to go, Carter said, finishing her coffee. An agent will escort you to a secure hotel for the night. You can visit both Michael and Robert tomorrow. Thank you for everything, Jessica replied sincerely. Carter smiled for the first time since they had met. Thank you for not giving up. If you hadn't kept looking for Michael, if you hadn't noticed those security cameras, who knows how this all would have ended? When Carter left, Jessica stood there contemplating her coffee, the choices she faced replaying in her mind like an endless film. 48 hours to decide the course of the rest of her life. The next 48 hours passed in a whirlwind of activity. The FBI operation had unleashed an unprecedented media storm in Cleveland. Local and national news channels broadcast continuous footage of next-gen executives in handcuffs and police officers being escorted from the precinct. They were calling it the biggest corruption scandal in Ohio's recent history. Jessica, isolated in a hotel room under federal protection, followed the events on television while she wrestled with her decision. She had been able to visit Robert in the hospital, finding him weak but recovering, already making plans to return to work as soon as the doctors would allow. Don't blame yourself, he had told her when she tried to apologize for involving him. I did what any honest ex-cop would have done. The difference is I survived to tell the tale. Her visit with Michael had been more intense. He had been moved to a more secure room with reinforced surveillance. His color had improved slightly, but the gravity of their situation remained unchanged. Have you thought about what I told you? He asked after a few minutes of trivial conversation, both of them avoiding the main topic. I haven't thought about anything else, Jessica confessed. The calls to her parents were particularly difficult. Unable to reveal the details of the situation, Jessica only told them that she was involved as a witness in a major case and that she was safe. Her worried mother had insisted on coming to Cleveland, but Jessica had dissuaded her, promising to call daily. Agent Carter appeared on the morning of the second day, bringing coffee and donuts as a peace offering. How's it going? She asked, sitting across from Jessica at the small table in the room. It's a lot to process, Jessica replied, grateful for the coffee. Any news on the case? Rawlings is being surprisingly cooperative, probably looking for a deal. He's given up names, dates, locations, implicating high-ranking officials and local politicians. Carter paused. The good news is that his testimony corroborates everything Michael has provided, strengthening our position for the trials. And the bad news? The cartel has already sent legal representatives. They're denying any connection to NextGen, preparing their defense. And, Carter lowered her voice even though they were alone, we've received intel that they've already put a price on Michael's head. Jessica felt a chill run down her spine. How much? Enough to tempt anyone with few scruples. That's why we need to move fast with the protection program. Which means you need my answer today, Jessica finished for her. Carter nodded. Preferably in the next few hours, the preparations take time. Jessica looked out the hotel window, observing the city that had been her home. Cleveland, with its lights, its people, its memories. The university where she had studied. The parks where she had grown up. The apartment that had been her first truly personal space. If I decide to go with him, she began slowly, How would it work, exactly? Carter leaned forward. You would both receive new, complete identities. Names, documents, fabricated credit histories. We would relocate you to a city where neither of you has ever been, preferably in another state. You'd receive assistance getting settled, housing, initial employment, financial support during the transition. Could we finish our studies? Yes, though at different universities, of course. We could arrange for transfers with equivalent credits. And my family? I could never see them again? Carter's expression softened. That's the hardest part. Direct contact would be extremely limited, at least for the first few years. Eventually, if the threat diminishes and the main cartel members are captured, we might be able to reconsider some restrictions. Jessica nodded, absorbing the information. Can I see Michael before I decide? Of course. In fact, he specifically asked to speak with you one last time before you make your decision. The trip to the hospital was silent. Jessica was lost in her thoughts as the agent assigned to her protection navigated through Cleveland's morning traffic. The streets looked different now, as if they belonged to another life, to another person. Michael was sitting in a chair by the window when she entered the room. He was wearing a hospital gown, but otherwise looked stronger, more rested. They're discharging me tomorrow, he announced with a cautious smile. Apparently, I'm not taking up enough bed space to justify a longer stay. Jessica managed a smile despite the tension in the room. Typical healthcare system. She sat across from him and for a moment neither spoke. There was so much to say, yet words felt utterly inadequate. I've been thinking, Michael began at last, and I want you to know that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. There's no right answer here, Jessica. I know, she said, reaching out to take his hand. What would you do if you were me? The question seemed to surprise him. Honestly, I don't know. I can't imagine giving up everything that defines me, my name, my history, my family. It's too much to ask. But you did, Jessica pointed out. You gave it all up. That was different. I didn't have a choice. Rawlings made it very clear. It was disappear or die. Jessica studied their intertwined hands, thinking how their lives had woven together over the years. From that first meeting in the library when he'd spilled coffee on her notes, to this extraordinary moment, deciding if they would abandon their identities together. Do you know what I missed most these past few months? She asked, her voice nearly a whisper. Michael shook his head. Certainty. Before you vanished, I had so much certainty. Who I was, what I wanted, where my life was going, and then suddenly the only certainty I had was that you were gone. And I had to find you. I'm sorry, Michael started, but Jessica stopped him. It's not an accusation. It's a realization. Over these months, my identity changed. I wasn't just Jessica Miller, the criminology student, anymore. I became Jessica Miller, the girlfriend of the boy from the library who disappeared, the amateur investigator, the person who refused to give up even when everyone told me to. Michael listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. And now you're asking me to give up my name, my history, but the truth is, I've already given up who I was before. That Jessica doesn't exist anymore. What are you saying? Jessica took a deep breath. I'm saying I'm going with you. Michael's expression shifted, a complex mix of shock, relief, and deep concern. Are you sure? It's a huge decision, Jessica. Your family, your studies. I can finish my studies somewhere else. And my family. It'll be hard, but at least they'll know I'm alive and safe, even if they can't see me. It's more than what your parents have had these past months. Michael seemed overcome with emotion. I don't know what to say. I never expected. I don't want you to regret this. There will probably be days when I do, Jessica admitted honestly. Days when I miss my old life, when I wonder what it would have been like if I'd chosen differently. But I also know that if I stay, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I'd gone with you, and that uncertainty would be worse than any regret. Michael rose from his chair, ignoring the pain in his shoulder, and pulled her into a one-armed embrace. I promise I will do everything I can to make sure you never regret this. Jessica let herself sink into his hug, into his warmth and his solidity. For the first time in months, she felt she had found an anchor in the storm. A soft knock at the door announced Carter's arrival. "Am I interrupting?" "No," Jessica answered, pulling back slightly but keeping her hand in Michael's. "In fact, I think I have my answer." Carter's gaze shifted between them, his understanding immediate. "Are you sure? Once we start the process, there's no going back." "I'm sure," Jessica affirmed with a conviction that surprised even herself. "I'm going with him." Carter nodded, respecting the gravity of the moment. "All right, we'll begin the preparations immediately. We'll need you to sign some documents, and then we'll talk about the practical details. What to take, what to leave behind, how to say your goodbyes without raising suspicion." "How much time do we have?" 3 days, max. The preliminary hearing against Rawlings is on Monday, and we want you both out of the state by then. Jessica felt the weight of the countdown, but also a strange calm. The decision was made. Now all that was left was to move forward. The following days were a whirlwind of controlled activity. Jessica packed the essentials from her apartment, leaving most of her belongings to be put in storage by the FBI. She wrote letters to her parents and close friends, vaguely explaining that she needed time to process everything that had happened and would be out of touch for a while. The hardest goodbye was with Robert, who understood her situation better than anyone. "You take care of yourself, Miller," he told her from his hospital bed. "And don't you worry about me. I survived 20 years on the streets of Cleveland. A little bullet hole isn't going to stop me." "Thank you for everything," Jessica replied, holding back tears. "For believing me, for helping me, for risking your life." "I'd do it again in a heartbeat," Robert assured her with a tired smile. "Now go. Go build a new life. You deserve it." On the morning of their departure, Jessica met Michael and Carter in a deserted parking lot on the outskirts of the city. Michael looked different. His hair was cut shorter and dyed a darker shade, and a few days' worth of stubble subtly changed the lines of his face. "Your turn," Carter said, handing Jessica a bag. Inside were items to transform her appearance: hair dye, colored contact lenses, and clothes she would never have chosen for herself. After changing in the restroom of a nearby gas station, Jessica barely recognized herself in the mirror. Her once brown hair was now a coppery red, and the contacts had turned her green eyes a soft hazel. "The documents," Carter continued, giving them each an envelope. "Memorize your new names, dates of birth, previous addresses, all the basic information. Your backstories are included: how you met, where you've lived, past occupations." Jessica opened her envelope and found a driver's license in the name of Elisa Ramirez, born in Sacramento, California, age 24. The photo was hers, taken just yesterday, but it was the face of a stranger. "Ramirez?" she asked, looking at Michael, who was holding similar documents. "David Ramirez," he answered, showing her his new license. "Apparently, we're married now." "It's an easier cover story for why you're moving together," Carter explained, "and it provides a legitimate reason for a shared residence and bank accounts." A wave of unreality washed over Jessica, now Elisa. She wasn't just leaving her name and her history behind. Now, to the eyes of the world, she was officially the wife of a man named David who didn't really exist. "Ready?" Carter asked, gesturing to the nondescript car waiting for them. "This will take you to Columbus, where you'll catch a flight to your final destination. For security, not even I know exactly where you're headed. Another agent will meet you there." Jessica took one last look at the Cleveland skyline. the city that had been her home her entire life. Then she turned her gaze to Michael, to David, who was watching her with a look of love, gratitude, and determination. "Ready for our new life, Elisa?" he asked, holding out his hand. Jessica took it firmly, feeling the weight of the simple wedding bands that now adorned their fingers. Symbols of a union that was both real and entirely fabricated. "Ready, David?" she replied, surprised by how naturally the strange name left her lips. As they got into the car, Jessica couldn't help but think of the extraordinary path that had led her to this moment. 4 months ago, her boyfriend had vanished without a trace. Now, against all odds, she had found him, only to lose her own identity in the process. The car pulled onto the road, carrying them toward a future that was uncertain, but shared. Jessica didn't know what this new beginning would hold, what challenges they would face, what kind of life they would build from scratch. But as she watched Michael's profile beside her, she remembered something her father once told her. Home isn't a place, it's the people you share it with. And though she was leaving everything she had ever known, she had the one certainty that mattered. She would not be facing the unknown alone. "I love you," she said softly, the words floating in the space between their old identities and their new ones. Michael, David, looked at her, his eyes saying everything words couldn't. "I love you," he answered simply. "Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. No matter our names, no matter where we are." The car accelerated onto the highway, carrying them far from Cleveland, far from Jessica Miller and Michael Thompson, and toward Elisa and David Ramirez, and the life they would build together. A life that, despite being founded on a lie, would be anchored in the only truth that mattered, the love they had found, lost, and fought to reclaim against all odds.